welcome here tonight to this little cottage. I'm Paddy Montague and this is Briege, McClean. So, well, let me tell you this much. Whenever I was a child, the neighbours used to come in and they'd tell you ghost stories. And you'd be afraid to go to bed at night. I know the man from the mountain, and before he dug the spuds, he courted a great big woman with sweets and cinnamon buds. Now the man was as thin as a harrow, he could live in the latch of a deer, and the woman, the mole, she was sonsy, she was light on her foot on the floor. Now the man knowed what he was doing when he courted big Rosie McDade, for she was a useful woman with a powerful lap with a spade. She was grand with a grip and a midden. She could run the legs of a foal. Aye, she was fit for the farmer in a place called Crockatole. Now the man, he got married to Rosie and he fetched her home in a car and he lit the lamp in the kitchen, for the place was as black as tar. He went out for the fall of the cattle, and boys, I say, when he came in from the byre, his Rosie was train away. Now the man by his name, it was Daniel, fell till and he cried like a whale, for he knew that the fairies had Rosie, and how would he get her again? Well, he wasn't long on the blankets when he felt the bite of a flea, and he clapped his hand on his oysters, and boys, I say, when he catched the flea to kill it, he nearly died with fright, for it says, "Now Don, excuse me, you're squeezing me far too tight." Oh, holy St. Patrick, what are ye? Based or Christian, says Don. "Not indeed," says I am a Christian, so please let me out of your hand. Sit up in the bed, ye boy, and hap yourself in a rug, and open your thumb and your finger, and let me light on your lug. Well, Don, he sat up in the blankets, and boys, I say, well, he didn't know where he was sitting. He was trembling for fear of the flea. Come now, it said, be manly. I'm kindly the more than we. I'm not that scarce of a creature, an unsignified thing like me. I was turned to the flea by the fairies. The king himself done the job. Me that was rare to be manly, and me with rheumatics begob. But the more I'm fatigued with the happening, I have come in the dark and the rain. I have come to tell you about Rosie, and how would you get her again? Well, boys, when he heard about Rosie, he pitched all the blankets away, leapt out of the bed like a lion, and boys, I say, "Mr. Sir," says he, "Your Honour, if my darling wee Rosie was back, the longest day we'd be living, the devil the flea would we crack." And now Daniel, that's more nor decent, the critter says in his ear, "For I'm coming straight from Rosie to tell ye she's living, she's well, and she's near. She's under a grassy mullen convenient to Tatty Keen Bob, with a canavan bed to lie on, and eating the best of prog." Now, on Halloween night, the fairies, when the moon begins to shine, there's a Camon's march at Firmus, and they'll not leave her behind. She'll be coming there sitting on a colt as white as snow, and the fairies will be dancing, so they'll have to travel slow. And there's your chance, ye boy ye, when they're passing by the lane. Be sure to reach for Rosie and hold your might and main. Wrap both your arms around her and hold them to the lock. And hold her, Daniel, hold her. Hold her to 12 o'clock. And for God's sake, don't dare name it to man, nor beast, nor bird, for the fairies said they'd kill her if the dupe she sent you word. Now that was all from the insect, and boys, I say, wasn't Daniel glad to hear it, that rare discourse from a flay? Now he says here, if you'll have it, I'll bestow you the half of the farm, and the full of your mouth for your supper, you can have it here under my arm. Well, the flay was the feed in him, happed it, and Don had a fortnight to wait. And I'll tell ye he went right nearly down the wee lane to the gate. And there at the stroke of 11, his sonsie big Rosie he seen, with the fairies before and behind her, and her dressed up like a queen. Well, Don made it long for his Rosie, and that's what started the fun. Well, you never seen such a handling since ever your day had begun. The fairies went raging around him. The king himself let us squeal. And they turned her into a salmon, and they turned her into a eel. They turned her into a greyhound, and they turned her into a duck. And no matter how they turned her, his heart was never broke. Then they turned her into a bonfire, and boys, I say, it was hard for Don to hold her, and her still blazing away. But he wrapped his arms around her, and cursed them help nor hell, for the blast of God was with him, for he held his health to 12. The minute the clock had struck it, the colt began to jog, and the route 3 risen headed back to Carrigain Bog. And Dan was left with his Rosie, and boys, I say, he had something in under his oxter, far better nor more than a flay. Now that's the story of Dan the farmer that came from Crockett-Hole, and the story of Rosie, the woman the fairy stole. Now if they kept their promise to that wee talking flay, the two of them had some scratching, and boys, I say. Years ago in Ireland, there used to be travelling tradesmen. Now you'd have got tinsmiths and tailors and shoemakers that travelled round the country, and they would have stayed in houses and rented a house or a room in a house for maybe a week. And the people, if there's something to be fixed, they came to the house and the man fixed it. So this particular story is about a travelling tailor. And he called at the house, and this particular house, and there was an elderly man, but his wife seemed to be a lot younger than him. But that was grand. He came in and got the room, and she showed him where the room was, and it was grand, and he paid for the room. And the following year he came back, and he met the woman at the door, and she says, I'm sorry, she says, I've bad news for you. And he thought right away he wasn't staying in the room, but he says, no, my husband has passed away from you were here last. Oh, he says, I'm very, very sorry to hear it. He says, but he says, it's okay. He says, don't worry, I'll find it out. Oh, no, she says, it's okay. She says, the room's there, the price remains the same, and you can stay in the room. So he was delighted, of course, and he went up that night and he got everything ready for the next morning, for the people would be coming, and he was just getting into bed, and he heard water running downstairs, and sort of wondered, and the water was running, and then He just didn't know. And he came to the top of the stairs and he looked down, and just as he looked down, he seen a large hare jump over the half door. He wondered, I think I'm dreaming or something. He went back to his bed and lay down, and he fell asleep. And it was grand. He got up the next morning and the woman had the breakfast ready for him, and the customers started to call and things was going grand. And 6 o'clock the last customer had left and the lady made him his supper, and it was grand. He went up to his room, tidied up a few things, and was getting into bed, and he heard the water running again. And he came down the stairs and he looked in, and there was a large bathtub, and a large hare just jumped out of the bathtub and out over the half door and away. What did the tiller do? But he jumped into the bathtub himself and was immediately turned into a hare. And he jumped out and he cleared the half door and he followed the hare that had jumped before him. And he followed on up, and he followed her up through a funny ditch, out over a marsh ditch, up into the mountain and into the green area, and he stayed back behind and he watched, and there other hares had gathered in this green area in a circle, and he got up and he crept over and he sat down in the midst of them. And this large buck hare stood up. He looked round. He said, "There will be no mischief tonight. There is a stranger in our midst." With that, the hare that was the tiller turned and he ran. And the female hare seen him and he ran and she ran and they ran after her. And they ran, and the faster he ran, the closer she was getting. And she was just as he was getting into the door, she was just getting, and he jumped into the bath, out up the stairs and into the room, and he slammed the door. And there he heard this noise on the door, and this awful noise on the door, and she was thumping and thumping, and she heard shouting. And he got to the back window, he got his case with everything in it, and he went out through the back window and he went down and away. Now if you really want to know that my story is true, that particular tiller got out of the bath that quick that there was the hair on the back of his neck still hadn't left. So if you see a tiller with hair on the back of his neck, you will know that my story is true.
My next story is set in Dublin. It happened a while ago. And even though it sounds like an Alfred Hitchcock tale, it's true. A young man called John Bradford, he was a university student, was on the side of the road just outside Dublin hitchhiking on a very dark night in the midst of a big storm. The night was rolling on and no car went by. The storm was so strong and the rain so heavy, he could hardly see a few feet ahead of him. But suddenly, he saw a car slowly coming towards him. And it stopped. John, desperate for shelter at this stage, and without thinking about it, got into the car and closed the door. Only to realise there was nobody behind the wheel. and the engine wasn't on. The car started moving, slowly. John looked at the road ahead and saw a curve approaching. Scared, he started to pray, begging for his life. Then, just before the car hit the bend in the road, a hand appeared out of nowhere through the window and turned the wheel. John was paralysed with terror. He watched as the hand came through the window, but it never touched nor harmed him. Shortly thereafter, John saw the lights of a country pub appear down the road. So, gathering strength, he jumped out of the car and ran to the pub. Wet and out of breath, he rushed inside and started telling everyone about the horrible experience he had just had. A silence enveloped the pub when everyone realised he was crying and he wasn't drunk. Suddenly the door opened and two other people walked in from that dark and stormy night. They, like John, were also soaked and out of breath. Looking round and seeing John Bradford sobbing at the bar, one said to the other, "Look, Paddy, there's that idiot that got into the car when we were pushing it."
Briege, that story I told was from Carlingford, County Louth, but I got my pen out and I wrote this recitation myself. So it goes something like this. I was sitting in front of the fire on a cold and wintry night, and I heard a knock at the door, and it gave me a hell of a fright, for I knew that it wasn't a neighbour, for the most of them doesn't knock. But when it opened, there stood the devil, gathering up some more of his flock. Well, he stood there staring right through me, with two horns, two big eyes and a beard. Well, I offered him a chair by the fire, for I wasn't one bit afeared. But when he seen I wasn't one to go with him, for I thought that my time wasn't up, well, he jumped 10 times round the kitchen, waiting for me now, ticker to stop. Finally, he sat down by the fire. The flames gave a bounce and a flare, yet swear by the way they were dancing that they knew that the devil was there. Then he started talking, and the truth I'll have to tell. He told me of a lot of folks that ended up in hell. The stories he told was a terror. It'd make the hair stand up in your head. For he told me of folks that were dying. Aye, and he told me of folks that were dead. But he liked the way I was living. The course I was taking was right. For he had a chair by his fire, and my soul he was taking that night. Says I now, hold on now a minute. Your stories don't scare me at all, for I've a wee spot up in heaven, right next to St. Peter and Paul. Well, with that, he just quit with his preaching, and his face turned as red as a flame, and he pulled the big book from his garment and opened it right at my name. Says I now, hold on now a minute. St. Peter has a book just the same, and if he opened it right at the middle, the letters would spell out my name. Says he, this Peter you talk of's in heaven. He sent me a letter last night. He's been watching the way you've been living, and said I could take you tonight. Well, the letter I read in a hurry, for my faith in St. Peter was great. But the devil he needn't to worry, for Peter had written my fate. With that, the big clock, it struck midnight, and his ticks, they just faded away. and I had give up with me fainting, and the devil had took me away. But as I were going out over the half door, one thought came into me head. I said one last act of sorrow as I grabbed by the leg of the bed. While my act of sorrow was heard, St. Peter came down and forgive me, and pulled down Nick away by the beard.